Hi, I'm Rowena. At my brother's promotion dinner, his wife raised her glass, smiled at me, and asked, "How does it feel to live in a glass cage?" Everyone laughed, even my parents. They thought they were mocking the failure of the family. What they didn't know was that I owned the company they were celebrating. They called me a burden, a bitter woman clinging to the past. But what if I told you, for 20 years, I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, but because I was building the very thing they thought they stole? So tell me, what's worse, being trapped in a cage or realizing too late who built it? Before we begin, let us know, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment below. Because this story, it starts with betrayal, but ends with something much louder than revenge. Silence. I hadn't wanted to go, not really. But my mother's voice on the phone had that brittle cheer that always meant I had no choice. "It would mean so much to your brother, honey. It's a family night." So I drove to the restaurant, pretending it didn't bother me. The evening air was heavy with that Texas kind of heat that sticks to your skin. Inside the car, the AC hummed, and in the reflection of the glass, my face looked contained. That was the word that came to mind, like someone had drawn neat edges around me and told me to stay within them. The valet took my keys, smiling like he knew who I was, or maybe he didn't. I walked through the lobby, heels clicking against marble, each step rehearsed, practiced. I'd spent years learning how to play the quiet one, the helper, the reliable sister who never needed the spotlight. By the time I reached the table, I'd already built my smile. My parents were already there, all pearls and pressed collars, beaming with the kind of pride that always skipped right over me and landed on Gareth. My brother stood near the head of the table, shaking hands with men who'd probably never heard my name. He looked good, confident, loud, every inch the man he'd been raised to be. "Rowena, you made it!" My father's tone was bright, as though I'd nearly forgotten the way. "You remember the partners, right? And of course, Marissa." Marissa turned to me with that smile, sugar laced with venom. "Rowena," she purred, "you look lovely. Must be nice to take a break from whatever it is you do these days." I laughed softly, like it was a joke. I'd gotten good at that too. "Oh, you know me," I said, sliding into my seat. "Always keeping busy." Dinner began with the usual small talk. My mother commented on the decor, my father on the wine, Gareth on himself. Every family dinner felt like a silent test, and I'd always known my grade before it began. Halfway through dessert, someone clinked a glass. Gareth stood, glass raised, all charm and easy arrogance. "Well," he began, "what a night. I'm beyond grateful to everyone who's been part of this journey, my team, my friends, and of course, family." Marissa leaned in, voice bright and sharp. "Yes, especially Rowena," she said. "She's been keeping everything so comfortable." There was a pause, a murmur of polite laughter. Then she tilted her head, lips curving. "Tell me, Rowena, how does it feel to live in a glass cage?" The table erupted, first a chuckle, then real laughter. My parents laughed too, because that's what people like them did. They joined the winning side. I smiled. It was the same smile I'd worn at board meetings, funerals, birthdays, every moment someone mistook my silence for submission. But inside, something shifted, not anger exactly, more like a click, a lock turning. When the laughter faded, the restaurant dimmed for the next act, a video montage of congratulations from Gareth's colleagues and family. Faces flashed across the screen, speeches, jokes, memories. Mine wasn't there. I leaned toward the event coordinator, keeping my voice calm. "Excuse me," I said. There should have been a short video from me." She frowned, polite but distracted. I didn't see it in the shared folder." That was a lie. I'd sent it myself, twice. I took a slow sip of wine. The glass trembled slightly in my hand, and for a second my reflection warped, distorted in the curve of the glass. I looked trapped inside it. A glass cage, Marissa had said. I almost laughed at how right she was. By the end of the night, the room was a blur of handshakes and congratulations. Gareth shook my shoulder the way one might pat a loyal pet. "Couldn't have done it without you, sis." My parents glowed beside him, their pride so bright it cast no light my way. I stood there, nodding, smiling, invisible. Outside, the heat had faded, replaced by that soft Texas night air that always felt heavier after rain. The valet brought my car around. I slid into the seat and sat still for a long moment, the sound of the engine humming beneath me. On my phone, the company's quarterly report blinked open. Numbers, names, contracts, familiar lines of power. My power. They think I'm invisible, I thought. And maybe they were right. I'd spent so many years shrinking myself to fit the shape they drew for me. I stared through the windshield, watching the restaurant lights blur into streaks of gold. My reflection stared back, quiet, steady, and no longer small. If they wanted me invisible, I'd show them how silence really works. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of the wine and not even because of what Marissa said, though those words did echo like a drip in the back of my skull. What kept me awake was that last look Gareth gave me, the pat on my shoulder. The kind you give a dog who's followed commands a little too well. By the time the sky turned from black to that quiet kind of blue only Texas mornings know, I was already up. I didn't turn on any lights. I just moved around the kitchen, barefoot, the floor cool beneath me. The coffee brewed in steady drips, and I leaned against the counter, watching steam rise through the morning stillness. The glass door to the patio fogged slightly with the warmth inside, another pane of glass, another barrier. I brought the mug into my home office and sat in front of my laptop. Sunlight crept across the floorboards, casting long shadows behind the bookshelf. I'd bought that shelf with my first consulting bonus. Funny, the things you remember when everything else feels unsteady. I opened the company's shared drive and clicked on the quarterly financials. I just wanted something simple, a sign that the world hadn't changed as much as it felt. But it had. My name wasn't there, not under founding members, not under ownership, not even in the footnotes. At first, I thought I was still groggy. I closed the file and reopened it. Still no Rowena Darnell. I clicked through the folders, pulled up the updated articles of incorporation. There it was, clear as daylight. Ownership, Gareth Darnell. Vice President, Marissa Darnell. There was no Rowena anywhere, not even a typo to claim. The form had been filed 2 months ago, signed, notarized, submitted. My hands moved on their own. I scrolled through the digital filing cabinet, pulled up the original agreement, gone. It wasn't an accident. This was a clean cut. My chest didn't pound, my face didn't flush. It was colder than that, like stepping into a room you used to live in and finding all your things gone, every trace, every memory scrubbed out. I whispered out loud, not even realizing it. They didn't just laugh at me, they erased me. I closed the laptop. It felt heavier than it should have. I walked to the living room, still clutching my coffee, and dialed the number I knew by heart, even though I hadn't used it much lately. Mom answered on the second ring. "Oh, Rowena, I was just thinking about you," she said. She always sounded like she was talking to someone holding a mirror too close. "I have a question," I said calmly. "Did Gareth ever mention changing the company paperwork?" A pause, like she was flipping through a mental script. "Well, sweetheart, he did say something about formalizing things. You know how he is. He's always been the organized one." I didn't say anything. Her voice softened, but not kindly, more like someone talking to a child they don't think understands. "I mean, you, Don't really need your name on it, do you, dear? Your family. That line dropped like a stone into a still pond. I looked down at the glass coffee table. My reflection stared back, faint and distorted. All the years I kept quiet, kept things running, kept peace, came rushing back with that one line. Your family. I heard her voice again in my mind, something she used to say whenever I'd push back as a teen. Don't make a scene. I didn't. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at my cold coffee for a while. Then I moved. Back in the office, I reopened the drive. But this time I copied everything. Every file, every line, every version. I downloaded them to an encrypted folder. Then I went deeper. I opened the archived drafts. That's when I found it, buried under a nondescript label, Rowena Silent Share. It was a PDF, time-stamped, untouched. The original ownership document, my 90%, my signature, my name clear as ever. What it didn't have was any record of a transfer. I never signed anything away. Gareth had built a castle on sand, and I was the earthquake. I sat back in my chair. For the first time in months, maybe years, my body felt still, not numb, not resigned, just still. They thought silence meant surrender, but silence can be storage. It can be strategy. I looked again at the document, then at the stack of old company files I'd kept in a drawer, almost out of habit. My name wasn't on the new ones, no. But it lived here. In this folder, in this flash drive, in this proof. They took my name off the paper, but the paper still remembers me. I didn't sleep the next night either, but it was a different kind of restlessness, not from humiliation or heartbreak. This time, it was strategy. The morning air had a sharpness to it, like the city was in on something. As I pulled into the underground garage of Darnell Innovations, I noticed how easily my pass still worked. No one had revoked my access, at least not yet. That told me they weren't expecting me to show up in person. They thought I'd stay home, stew in silence, play the role. I stepped into the elevator alone. My reflection in the polished doors stared back, too calm to be angry, too focused to look lost. As the elevator climbed, I caught myself smoothing down the front of my blazer. Muscle memory. The doors opened into the marble lobby. There it was, sleek, cold, expensive. The receptionist, new, probably no older than 25, looked up with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Good morning," she said, too chipper, too quick. "Do you have an appointment?" I gave her a small smile. "No, but I built this building." She blinked, then glanced toward a man standing nearby, probably security in a tailored suit. I walked past her, heels echoing across the polished floor. I didn't owe her a history lesson. At the far end of the lobby, the wall that used to carry the etched glass panel with my name now held a new one. Vice President Marissa Darnell. The letters shimmered under the lights like a trophy. I stood still for a second, letting the moment settle into me. All around, the office walls were glass, reflective, impossibly clear. But when I looked closely, none of them showed me, not who I was. The phrase floated back, glass cage. Only now I wasn't locked inside it. I was walking around it, observing the illusion. I moved through the open plan workstations. People glanced up, then quickly backed down. Some recognized me. Most pretended not to. No one said a word. It wasn't surprise that kept them quiet. It was complicity. I passed the hallway, leading to what used to be my office. My feet carried me there before I realized it. And when I opened the door, it felt like stepping into a house someone else now lived in. Amber Lynn sat behind the desk, my desk, typing with both hands, earbuds in. She looked up when she saw me, startled, then stood so quickly her chair rolled backward. "Oh, hi, Ms. Darnell. I wasn't expecting, they told me you were consulting remotely now." She said it like a question she didn't want answered. Did they? I replied, voice level, eyes on hers. Her smile twitched, nervous. I can leave if— No, stay. You didn't steal anything. You were just handed the keys. I scanned the room, same layout, but everything had been softened. Plants, new lamps, a lavender diffuser by the window. A desk plaque read, Amber Lynn, Director Operations Strategy. I nodded once, turned on my heel, and walked out. Back in the hallway, I didn't head for the elevator. I took the stairs, needed a minute without mirrored walls. By the time I stepped outside into the atrium, someone was already waiting. Harris Boone. Quiet man, numbers man. Been with us since year 2. Never said much, never needed to. He adjusted his glasses and fell into step beside me as I reached for the elevator again. I shouldn't say anything, he murmured, but check the offshore quarterly reports. I glanced at him. Which ones? There's a new batch that doesn't line up with internal expense ratios. Starts about 6 months ago. You'll see it. I can't send it from my work email. I tilted my head, acknowledging. You remember who built this place, Ms. Darnell, he added. Some of us do. I didn't say thank you, just nodded. He walked away first. Back in my car, parked just outside, I sat with the engine off. No music, no air, just quiet. I pulled up the company website on my phone. About us, team, leadership, nowhere. Then finally, at the bottom of the History tab, tucked into a timeline entry like an afterthought, Founder, Rowena Darnell, 2009-2016. Historical acknowledgement. Historical, like a museum artifact. I stared at that word until the letters blurred, buried, but not gone. I opened a blank email. My attorney's address filled itself in. They took my name off the door. Let's see how they handle the keys. I parked outside Evelyn Cho's office 10 minutes early, but sat in the car 5 more before walking in. Something about her office always smelled like sandalwood and old books, comforting and calculating at the same time. She was the kind of woman who never raised her voice because she never needed to. When I stepped inside, she glanced up from her laptop and gave a nod. You brought the files? I handed over the thick folder I'd printed and marked the night before. Her fingers moved fast and precise, flipping through contracts and shareholding statements like she'd already guessed what she'd find. They never filed your release, she said, not even looking up yet. Rowena, your signature's nowhere on the divestment forms. You're still the majority shareholder, 90%. I blinked. She finally met my gaze. They filed the restructure, but not your release. Gareth's signature is here. Marissa's too. But yours, absent, which makes all of it cosmetic. I leaned back in the leather chair, arms crossed loosely. Not disbelief exactly, more like vindication cracking through the fog. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. You could take back control, this week. Legally, they don't stand a chance. I nodded, slowly. I could. But, she added, the question is, do you want to? I didn't answer right away. The truth was still marinating. I left her office as the sun was dipping low, brushing the buildings with soft gold and long shadows. The traffic on Congress Avenue buzzed around me, oblivious. I stopped by a small corner cafe, grabbed a black coffee, then headed home. Back at the house, the first thing I did was check the encrypted folder Harris had emailed me. I used one of my old decryption tools. Nothing fancy, just something I'd coded in the early days when trusting cloud services felt naive. It opened slowly, 5 nested folders. Within those, PDFs, scans, statements. I clicked through one by one. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking for, until it hit me. Loan documents. A series of transfers and signed collateral agreements, secured under my name, my shares. Gareth had used my ownership as leverage for personal loans. a vacation property in Sedona, a renovation on their beach house, even an investment in a private equity firm with laughably poor returns, collateralized under my equity. Not just reckless, criminal. I whispered into the silence. So that's how he bought their silence. I hit print, every page feeding slowly through the tray. The hum of the machine became rhythmic, like a drumbeat building in my chest. Outside, dusk settled across the lawn, long streaks of red slanting through the windows. When the last page slid out, I placed it with the others in a fireproof safe in the closet, still tucked behind an old stack of photo albums my mother insisted I keep. I turned and caught my reflection in the glass of the patio doors. Not a cage anymore. Now it was a mirror. Later, I sat by the kitchen table. No wine, just water with lemon. The pages I'd read replayed in my head. Numbers, signatures, initials. But louder than all of it were memories. The years I stayed late while Gareth went to happy hour. The weekends I skipped weddings and showers and vacations because deadlines were more real than people. And still, Mom would say, "You're lucky your brother lets you help." Help. They'd mistaken my grace for weakness, my silence for stupidity, my patience for permission. They built an empire on my back, then tried to erase the spine of it. I opened a new document, a legal template I hadn't used in years. Silent transfer authorization, executed in escrow. I filled it out without fanfare, no dramatics, just dates, signatures, a quiet timestamp. I emailed it to Evelyn with one line, "Hold for now, timestamp and notarize, do not submit." She replied minutes later, "Understood." I sat in the stillness for a moment longer. Then I walked to the light switch, turned it off. My reflection vanished. The glass showed only black. If they built a cage for me, they should have checked who owned the glass. By Friday, the text came through like clockwork. "Mom, Sunday dinner, family only, be polite this time." No emoji, just a period, like a warning hidden behind a smile. I stared at the screen a while before responding with a simple, "Of course." I arrived 10 minutes early, like always. The front door creaked the same way it had since we were kids, though it had been repainted in some forgettable shade of beige. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and roast beef. Mom's signature tactic, feed them full and distract with nostalgia. The glass table in the dining room gleamed like it had just been installed. I could see the distorted reflection of the chandelier overhead, warped light and warped intentions. Dad sat in his usual armchair in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper he'd already finished. When I said hello, he grunted, not looking up. Mom, on the other hand, fluttered around the kitchen like a sitcom matriarch on cue. "Oh, honey, you're early," she called. "We've got your favorite, roast, green beans, mashed potatoes. The real stuff, not that low-carb nonsense." I smiled thinly. "Smells great, Mom." Gareth and Marissa were the last to arrive, of course. 10 minutes late and acting like royalty, gracing the dinner with their presence. Marissa wore something white and crisp, like she was hosting a summer brunch for strangers, not eating meatloaf with in-laws she couldn't stand. "Rowena," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You look rested." Translation, "You look passive enough to ignore." I played along. "So do you. That spa membership must be doing wonders." She gave me a stiff smile, her eyes already calculating. We gathered around the dining table. The room buzzed with small talk, clinking utensils, and a forced sense of harmony. Gareth took center stage like he always did, voice louder than necessary. "Expansion's going better than expected," he announced, slicing into his roast. "I've been talking with a few investors out of Houston, real players." Mom beamed like she'd birthed a Fortune 500 CEO. "That's wonderful, darling. You've always had such vision." He nodded, smug. "Someone has to steer the ship." especially with how things were before. Marissa dabbed her mouth with her napkin and chimed in. Not everyone is built for leadership. Some are better behind glass. A light chuckle spread around the table. Even Dad let out a breath that might have passed for a laugh. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Instead, I looked at Marissa and said evenly, leadership isn't about who speaks loudest. It's about who signs the paychecks. The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice the roast. Gareth's fork paused midair. Marissa's smile stiffened into something brittle. Even Mom set her glass down a little too quickly. Rowena, she said in that soft, warning tone, let's not ruin the evening. I raised my glass with a mild smile. Wouldn't dream of it. The rest of dinner continued like a play where everyone forgot their lines. No one knew how to recover from truth, casually slipped into conversation. After the dishes were cleared and Mom busied herself with leftover containers, I stepped out onto the patio for air. The Texas evening was warm and buzzing with cicadas. Marissa joined me minutes later, the click of her heels sharp against the tile. I don't know what game you're playing, she said, voice low and rehearsed. But if you're thinking of stirring things up, just remember, we're a family. Families protect each other or destroy each other. I turned to face her, slowly. Good thing I'm excellent at building foundations. Her pupils narrowed just a fraction. She tried to smile, but it didn't quite land. Careful, Rowena. Not everyone appreciates subtext. I let the silence stretch between us like a wire pulled tight. Then I walked past her, back inside. Before I left, I placed my half-empty wine glass back on the gleaming dining table. Deliberate, right near the center. A fingerprint clear on the rim, a ghost of presence they couldn't wipe away. I found Gareth near the hallway, checking his phone. Leaning in, I said quietly, "You might want to check your accounts this week. Something's off." His head jerked slightly. What does that mean? I didn't respond. Just held his gaze a moment longer before stepping past him toward the door. Outside, the sky had gone from rose gold to indigo. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time, they didn't see through me. They saw themselves. And that, I realized, was when people like Gareth started to panic. 2 mornings later, I woke to a flood of notifications lighting up my phone like fireworks. Missed calls, messages, mentions. Then the headline hit me before the caffeine did. Former Darnell Innovations co-founder under investigation for financial misconduct. The words blurred for a second before I forced myself to read the full article. It was on a mid-level financial blog. Credible enough to do damage, not big enough to risk a libel suit. Clever. The article quoted internal sources and described questionable accounting practices under Rowena Darnell's tenure. Then, halfway through, there it was. Gareth's favorite kind of betrayal, the polite knife. She may have contributed early on, the quote read, but she's been out of touch with our operations for years. My lips pressed together. I could almost hear his voice saying it, calm, dismissive, coated with concern, the kind that fooled investors and parents alike. I closed my laptop slowly. Interesting, I murmured to no one. They're calling the architect a liability. The coffee had gone cold, but my pulse hadn't. I called Evelyn. She answered on the second ring. They've gone public, I said. Her tone was measured, but I caught a spark beneath it. Perfect. I blinked. Perfect? They just breached confidentiality, she explained. Every clause you signed still applies. That article is grounds for an emergency review, and Gareth just handed you the key. The calm that followed wasn't peace. It was precision. Then it's time, I said. We met at her office an hour later. Papers spread across her desk, contracts, bylaws, ownership clauses. Evelyn pointed to one section near the bottom of the founding agreement. A clause I'd written myself years ago, buried under corporate legalese. Shareholder misconduct triggers immediate suspension of authority pending audit, she read aloud. Exactly, I said. He accused me of fraud, publicly. That accusation forces a review. She smiled, small, sharp, and proud. You just turned his weapon back on him? I signed the request for an emergency audit and handed it over. The ink barely dried before Evelyn faxed it to the compliance board. You wanted an audience, I whispered to myself. Now you have one. By noon, my phone buzzed again, this time from Harris. They're scrambling, internal memos flying everywhere. Gareth's in a meeting with Marissa and legal. Good. Later that day, I sat in my car outside a quiet downtown restaurant, watching through the window as Gareth leaned across a table toward a man I recognized, a journalist. I didn't need to get close. My private investigator had already wired the booth. I watched him gesturing wildly, trying to spin control back into his hands. The journalist wasn't buying it. He was flipping through notes, expression tightening with every page. Then I heard it through the tiny earpiece. The inconsistencies in your Cayman accounts. Are those from your personal or company portfolio? Gareth froze. What inconsistencies? The ones under your signature. His smile faltered. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. The journalist closed his notebook. You might want to get ahead of this story. I sat back in my car, watching through the glass. It wasn't anger I felt. It was symmetry. For once, he was the one caught inside the reflection, seeing his world crack from the inside out. By dusk, the city lights began to shimmer across the windows of my apartment. I sat on the balcony, the hum of downtown life below me, sirens in the distance, laughter spilling from bars, a dog barking 2 streets away. Life went on. My phone rang. Gareth. I let it buzz 3 times before letting it go to voicemail. His voice came through seconds later, tight, desperate, still trying to sound in control. You've gone too far, Ro. You'll regret this. I set the phone down beside my glass of wine and whispered into the night. I regret waiting this long. The city glowed in the glass railing around me. Once, it had felt like a cage. Now it was something else. Clear, strong, mine. He tried to destroy my name. I'll make sure it's the last name he ever uses in business. By the time the sun broke through the morning haze, I was already in the elevator, 30th floor, corporate headquarters. My reflection in the elevator's glass walls stared back at me like a woman who had already won. Calm, controlled, ready. When the doors opened, the sound hit first. Low murmurs, the shuffle of papers, and the hum of restrained panic. The boardroom was packed, executives, legal advisors, auditors, and my brother sitting at the head of the table like a king watching his throne tremble. Marissa sat beside him, immaculate as ever, though her lipstick looked a little too forced, her posture a little too tight. I entered last. Everyone turned. Good morning, I said evenly, setting my folder on the table. You wanted transparency, Gareth. Let's start with the glass. No one moved. Outside, the skyline of Austin shimmered against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The reflections of all of us flickered back, a collection of faces that suddenly had nowhere to hide. The auditors began their report. Their voices were steady, clinical, merciless. We've traced several off-book transfers over the past 9 months. The funds were moved through secondary accounts before ending up offshore. A pause. A few heads turned toward Gareth. All transfers, the lead auditor continued, were executed under one authorization, Gareth Darnell. The silence that followed felt like the pause before thunder. Gareth barked out a laugh, too loud, too brittle. This is ridiculous. She's framing me. He jabbed a finger toward me. She's been obsessed with control since day 1. I didn't respond. I opened my folder and slid a set of papers across the polished glass table toward him. "That's my signature," I said, my tone cool, steady. "On the original incorporation documents, not yours." He stared down, eyes darting between the page and me. "For the record," I continued, voice rising just enough to reach the far end of the room, "these documents confirm I still own 90% of Darnell Innovations. You've been borrowing against my name, using my equity as collateral. Every cent of it, every success you've had, is built on stolen credit." The company's legal advisor, a man who'd served us for over a decade, spoke softly but firmly. "It's true. We verified the filings this morning." The words landed like a hammer. Marissa turned toward Gareth, her expression drained of color. "You said she signed it all over," she whispered, voice trembling. Gareth snapped back, the mask cracking. "Shut up, Marissa!" Her jaw fell open. The entire table flinched. The sound of the city below seemed to fade until all that remained was the echo of his voice. I leaned forward slightly, my tone soft enough to make him look at me. "When you called me a kept woman," I said, "you weren't wrong. I was keeping you. Alive, employed, and ungrateful." He tried to speak, but no sound came. Marissa stood, arms trembling. "You used me," she hissed at him. "You said this was handled." He turned on her again, desperate. "You were part of this too. Don't you dare." "Enough," I interrupted, standing. "This company doesn't belong to lies anymore." Security stepped closer at a nod from Evelyn, who'd been standing quietly near the door. "Effective immediately," I said, sliding another document across the table. "You're suspended pending full legal review. Your access to company accounts and communications is revoked." Gareth lunged to his feet, but the guard stepped between us. I gathered my papers calmly, sliding them back into my briefcase. "We'll rebuild this company on truth," I told the board. "That begins today." As I turned to leave, my reflection followed me along the glass wall, clear, steady, and whole. The same walls that once trapped me now framed me, no longer a cage, my crown. For the first time in years, I didn't hear their laughter, only the sound of glass breaking. It echoed in my ears long after I'd left the boardroom. Not a real shatter, no, the walls were still intact, but something had broken, something old and invisible, like a wall I hadn't realized I'd been leaning against my whole life. Now that it was gone, all that was left was open air and the unfamiliar weight of my own freedom. By nightfall, I found myself parked outside my parents' house. I hadn't planned to go, but after Evelyn sent me the press release and the audit findings hit the news cycle like a hammer, I knew the silence wouldn't hold much longer. The driveway was empty. Gareth's car wasn't there. Neither was Marissa's. Just the flickering porch light casting long shadows across the steps. That house used to feel warm, full of noise, Sunday dinners, the smell of roast chicken and lemon pie. Now even the flowers looked stiff. The family nameplate was still nailed to the bricks beside the front door. The Darnells. I wondered how much longer it would stay there. I took a slow breath and rang the bell. No footsteps, no voices. Just the sound of the door creaking open. Inside, the lights were dim. My mother was pacing in the hallway, her cardigan twisted at the sleeves. She didn't look at me. My father sat in his recliner, newspaper open in front of him, but his eyes weren't moving. I shut the door quietly behind me. "I assume you've seen the news." No one answered right away. Finally, my mother stopped pacing and turned. "You didn't have to humiliate him like that." Her voice was brittle, too calm to be casual, too sharp to be maternal. "He's your brother." I held her gaze. "And I was your daughter. That didn't seem to matter." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked older than she did last week, like the weight of secrets was finally pulling her spine down. "I did what I thought was best for the family," she said. "You were always too strong, too much like your father." I glanced at my dad. He didn't flinch. He just kept staring at the same spot on the page, like he was hoping the words would save him. "You never stopped him," I said, voice low. "You let him treat me like I was disposable. And now Gareth does the same." She crossed her arms, hugging herself. "I was trying to keep the peace. That's all I ever wanted." "No," I said, taking a step forward. "You wanted silence, and you got it, for decades. You chose not to see what he was doing because it was easier." Her face twisted, not with anger, but something worse, guilt. "I read the original contract," I continued. "The one you and Dad signed when I was 22. The one where I was listed as majority shareholder." She looked down. "You knew I never signed it away, didn't you?" Her silence was answer enough. "You knew," I repeated. "You knew what they were doing, and you stayed quiet." Tears welled in her eyes. "Someone had to keep us together." "No," I said, the words cold and clear. "In doing so, you broke us." The clock in the dining room ticked loud enough to hear across the house. My father finally put down the paper, rubbing his eyes like they ached. "You've proven your point, Rowena," he muttered. I laughed, bitter and short. It wasn't a point, it was the truth, and the truth shouldn't feel like a threat unless you're hiding something. He looked at me then, not with shame, not even regret, just resignation. That same tired expression I'd seen all my life when I questioned why Gareth was always excused, why I had to be the one to bend. On the muted TV, a news anchor replayed a clip from the boardroom. Me standing behind the glass table, firm, composed. Gareth being escorted out. The volume was off, but the image said everything. My mother fumbled for the remote and clicked it off. "We'll never recover from this," she whispered. I looked at the blank screen. Our reflections hovered faintly across the dark surface. 3 figures suspended like ghosts. "You'll recover," I said quietly. "You always do. Just not with me." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with all the years we never talked about what mattered, all the birthdays missed, all the apologies that never came. I turned toward the hallway. My heels echoed softly on the wood floors. When I reached the front door, her voice stopped me. "Rowena!" It broke on the second syllable. "Can you forgive us?" I didn't turn around. "I already did," I said. "That's why I stopped waiting for you to understand." Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves rustled against the pavement like old secrets chasing after me. As I stepped through the doorway, the porch light caught the glass in the door behind me. For a second, I saw myself reflected in it, just a faint outline. A woman in motion, walking away. And then the image dissolved into the night. Silence used to break me. Now it's mine. That thought followed me through the seasons, through the dust of boardroom battles and the stillness that came after. It's been 6 months, but it feels like another life, one that belonged to a woman who'd spent too long biting her tongue and folding her power into palatable shapes. Today, I sit at my desk, in a sun-drenched office that finally feels like mine in more than name. The glass walls no longer feel cold or performative. They're clean now, not just in polish, but in purpose. The reflection they throw back at me is not a cage, not a warning. It's just a woman who made it out. Whole, unapologetic. Gareth and Marissa's names are gone, scrubbed from the directory without ceremony. The board restructured itself without drama this time. Investors came back, not because they liked me more, but because the truth was harder to argue with than charisma. There's a framed quote on the shelf behind me. Simple black text on cream paper. "Let them underestimate you. It's the quiet ones who rebuild. I printed it after the final audit was cleared, after the last lawyer left, and Evelyn hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I see it every morning before I open my email. It grounds me. The intercom buzzes. My assistant's voice is soft. "Rowena, there's a young intern outside. She's asking for 5 minutes. She seems nervous." I glance at the time. It's already close to 5. Most of the building has started winding down. "Send her in." The door opens slowly, and in comes a girl who can't be more than 22. Brown curls pulled back too tight, blazer a size too big, eyes darting between her notebook and the carpet. I see her before she speaks, not just the intern, but myself at that age. "I'm sorry," she stammers, clutching a stack of notes. "I was supposed to pitch the sustainability initiative, but I don't think I'm ready." I nod for her to sit, though she doesn't. "Why do you think that?" She swallows, clearly trying to keep her voice steady. "Because I don't know if I belong here. Everyone seems to know what they're doing. I just feel like I'm faking it." I smile gently. "So did I." She looks up. "There was a time when I stood exactly where you are, in a room full of men who had no idea what I'd built, because I'd let them believe it was their house. And for a long time, I kept quiet, thinking if I was just good enough, they'd invite me to the table." I open my drawer and pull out a pen. Silver, worn smooth from years in drawers and pockets. My father gave it to me after my college graduation, before I knew what it would be used for. I hand it to her. "You'll need this for your first signature." She blinks. "Really?" "You've got 5 minutes, right? Practice like it's already yours." She smiles, soft and surprised, and for a moment she stands a little taller. After she leaves, the quiet returns. Not the aching, kind I used to fear, but a calm I've come to welcome. I walk toward the window, letting the warmth of the sun stretch across my face. The skyline looks different today. Austin, wild and alive, sprawled beneath clouds that move without apology. The reflection in the glass doesn't scare me anymore. There's no mask there, just a woman who stayed when she could have disappeared, who rebuilt when she had every reason to walk away. There's a knock, this time softer. Evelyn. "The last audit's officially closed," she says, walking in with that usual calm of hers. "You're free of everything. It's clean." I sit back down and exhale. I was free the moment I stopped asking them to see me. She nods slowly. "You changed more than a company, Rowena." I smile. "We did." That night, long after the building has gone quiet, I open a drawer and pull out a blank page. No letterhead, no format, just my handwriting and whatever truth is left. To the girl who once sat in silence while others laughed, you were never small. You were studying the noise, waiting for your moment to speak. When you finally did, you didn't raise your voice. You raised the truth. I fold the letter and place it back in the drawer. Not to be sent. Not to be read again, just to be written. The sky outside is shifting to dusk. The glass walls turn gold, glowing with the last light of day. There's no sharpness to it, no glare, just warmth. The cage they built for me had glass walls. So does the life I built for myself. But now, the difference is simple. This one lets the light in. They taught me silence was weakness. I taught them silence can echo louder than thunder.